Welcome to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast, where we inspire women by teaching applicable skills and tools and assisting them with connecting with one another, healing, and aspiring to their highest selves so they can reach their full potential. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such an honor to have Autumn Bennett on the show with us today. Autumn is a firm believer in the gift of hope. If there's anything that she could give a person, it would be the knowledge that there is always hope. She is the wife of a recovering sex addict. She has a lot of recovery experience with betrayal trauma through 12-step, specialized therapy, somatic experiencing, lots of hard work, dedication, and an amazing therapist, supportive family, and a group of valiant warrior women, and the grace of Jesus Christ, Autumn has been able to move forward, thrive, and heal her life wounds. Autumn and her husband have dedicated the last 14 years to helping others in their recovery journeys. And as a couple, they have been able to share their story of hope, recovery, and the atonement to thousands through the recovery program, Firesides, television, and the radio, Skype, and podcasts. Her walk with the Lord has been one enveloped in love. She believes he has walked along her side and carried her on this journey. Time and time again, he has placed in her path the right people, programs, tools for healing, growth, and happiness. The undeniable fact that the Lord is in all details, and through being open, vulnerable, and bringing things to light, Autumn has had a wounded heart healed and has blessed many immensely. She believes that we all have the power to heal and repair not only ourselves, but our familiar wounds and our future generations. She is the mom to 3 amazing kids and has been married to her awesome husband for 25 years. She loves baking, photography, playing card games, and jewelry making. Autumn, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Sarah.
Tell us a little bit about your journey and how it's brought you to where you are today.
Okay, so in 2008, I found out about my husband's sex addiction. I got a phone call from a friend's spouse, letting me know that he was having an affair with that person's wife, and it shook my world upside down. I actually decided that I was going to take my life at that time. And I attempted suicide, and thankfully that didn't work. And I was in the ICU for 3 days. And then after that, I was at LDS Hospital, their mental hospital, for a week. And during that week, I kind of found out a little bit more about what was going on with my husband. And bits and pieces. And during that time, I needed to make a decision whether or not I was going to stay with him or separate. Prior to that, a little backstory, we had been fighting, not fist fighting, but like arguing, and just had a lot of contention in our home for about 2.5 years prior to this. And we had been going to marriage counseling, and he had been lying the whole time. He was having affairs during that time as well, which I didn't know about. And so back to that week, I just spent a lot of time praying, and I had I'm LDS, so I will be using that in my story if that's okay. But my ecclesiastical leader came to the hospital and just let me know that he would support whatever decision that I had made or was going to make, and that I needed to do what was best for me. And that really gave me a lot of hope, because I'd heard stories of, you just need to stay, you just need to do this, and my parents were really mad. And my mom and stepdad were actually like, we'll do whatever it takes to get you out of your house. We'll pay for you to have a job, or like pay for you to get a car, and we'll help you find a job, and we'll help you with the kids. We just want you to leave the situation. And I just didn't know what to do. And so during one of my prayers, I just felt very prompted to stay in my marriage. And part of it was because I had seen glimpses of the man that Chris could become. And I just knew I wanted to stay. And it wasn't because we had kids. It wasn't because we had financial obligations. It was because I truly loved him. And I got home from the hospital, and we were still seeing our marriage counselor at that time. And she actually said to Chris, I think you have a sex addiction. And this was in 2008. So sex addiction wasn't really like on the forefront in America like it is now. And so I said, what? She's like, yeah, I think Chris has a sex addiction. And so she referred him to a therapist that specialized in that. And he went to him for about 3 months. And then he said, I'm actually leaving my practice, but I have this program I would like to refer you to. And he said, well, okay. So he showed me the program, and I was like, this isn't for me. I don't know about this. He's like, I really think we should go. And so we ended up going, and I thought I was going to walk into a group full of just males, and I didn't know what to expect. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. I walked into this room, and there were men and women, and it was men and their spouses. And it's called, the program was called Lifestar. And we did 3 different phases. So phase 1 is a big group, and they give you like books for therapy, and you do group work. And then I can remember one session that we were sitting in, they had us do a family of origin assignment where you kind of go back through your family and figure out like addiction or like divorce, alcoholism, drug addiction, drug use, issues that might happen. And I really did my assignment, and they actually picked me and my husband from the group to come up and like be the examples. And they had us face each other, and then they brought people up to represent each member of our family. And the therapist looked at me and said, you're repairing generations that have been broken. It's stopping with you and Chris, and you're healing what's broken, and you're spreading it back generations. And it impacted my life so much. I went, I'm in the right place. Mm-hmm. I'm learning the right things, and I'm going to go full bore into healing. And so after phase 1, you go into what's called phase 2 and 3, and you're put into smaller groups with the same sex. So I was in a group with 5 other women, and my husband was put into a group with 5 men. And we met weekly for weekly therapy. And then my therapist met with me personally as well. And I did that program and graduated. And actually, about 18 months into that program, just something still fell off in our marriage. We had been arguing, and I just knew something was off. And my therapist said, he can't keep living a lie. So he's either going to die, he'll take his life because he can't live a lie, or at some point he's going to come out and tell you if there is something going on. What are you going to do? And I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I had done a lot of crazy making during that 18 months. And I shouldn't say crazy making, it was more betrayal, trauma response, and like checking phones. My dad taught me how to hack into a computer. And so I would get onto his computer and like hack in to see like his search histories and stuff, because he was good at hiding things. He had never done anything, looked at porn in our home. And I should say he had issues with masturbation, pornography, and he had several long-term affairs. Just to kind of give a little clarification with that. But during that 18-month period, I would check his phone bills. Well, it turns out during that 18 months, he was still lying, and he had started another affair. And he was like finagling his phone bills. It was back in the day when you got a phone bill in the mail instead of just looking at a history. And kind of the same time frame, we both had spiritual experiences. So at that 18-month mark, I can remember kneeling down in my kitchen and just praying to God to take away the pain and angst that I was feeling for just 5 minutes. And I had this really epiphanial moment where it was, Autumn, you give me Chris, you let me take care of Chris, and you heal your own life. And I promise she'll be okay. Mm. And so I started doing that. I started and I just wanted peace for 5 minutes. And that 5 minutes turned into hours. And then those hours turned into days, and then weeks, and then months. And then I would feel peace, and then I kind of revert back. But I knew that if I just continued working on my own life and letting God take care of Chris, that whatever happened would be okay. Well, about that same time, we had gone to a church thing with our daughter, and my husband was sitting there, and he had a moment where the Spirit spoke to him and said, you need the gospel back in your life. You need to have the priesthood back in your life, and you need to get right with God. And so within about 3 months, I just knew some things were still off. And so I approached him and said, hey, what's going on here? I just want you to know that I'm not going to try and take my life again. I had a couple of things that I was like, if it's one of these things, we will be divorced. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, it's not that, but I do have some things I want to talk to you about in therapy tomorrow. I said, okay. So we went to therapy. Well, he called me the next morning, said, I'll meet you at therapy. And I went, oh, this isn't going to be good. And we got to therapy, and he disclosed some more things to me, and we ended up separating in-house. And I should say that the first time I discovered everything, we were separate in our house for about 6 months. We slept in separate room. Well, it was about 4 months. And then this time it was about five or six. And that's kind of when he got clean. And our therapist said, you're going to start this program over. I need you to start this program over. And you're going to have to explain to your guys like what you've done. He basically called him out and said, you haven't done what you're supposed to do in your recovery. And so he started his program over, and I just continued on with mine, and I ended up graduating. And I'm really the group of women that I was with, they're an amazing group, and we still keep in touch and we still check in. And my husband slowly came out with everything. He did full disclosure. I don't recommend, if you're a spouse in betrayal, to have the disclosures that we had in the beginning. Now knowing how disclosure works, my therapist has kind of changed how he does things in his office over the last 15 years. But disclosure shouldn't be happening on a whim. It shouldn't be happening just in a bishop's office, going and confessing and being like, throwing it all up to the bishop and your wife while they're sitting there and just on it. Like, it needs to be planned and known, and this is what's happening, and like a set appointment. But he started coming clean, and I had some boundaries, which were really helpful for me. I learned a lot about boundaries over that 18 months and healing my own wounds from childhood. But one of my boundaries was we had a 24-hour slip rule. So if he had a slip with masturbation, pornography, or if he looked at another woman for longer, we had a 3-second rule, like longer than 3 seconds. He had to disclose that to me. And for the first 6 months, he was talking to me almost every day about slips. I had a slip today in the shower. Oh, I had a slip here. Oh, I looked at this. And it was very discouraging for me. but I was also, I look back now and grateful is the word I'm going to use. I was grateful that he was being honest because I could take the honesty over any lie.
Right.
And so after about that 6 months, I kind of called him out again. I said, look, dude, you're not utilizing your group. You're not utilizing your therapy. You're not utilizing your sponsors. Like, pull your head out and get the right help. And so he did, which I'm very grateful for. And after about a year, he was able to, so this is over a 4-year process. You know, this isn't just like wham, bam, here's another year. And, but he was able to be rebaptized. He was excommunicated from our church in February of 2008. And he was able to be, maybe it was 2007. And he was able to be rebaptized in 2010. And then he received his priesthood blessings back in 2011. And he has 14 years of sobriety.
Wow.
So 14 years of sobriety from women, 13 from masturbation and porn. Mm-hmm. So he has a lot of sobriety behind him. In 2011, and he had gone to SA. So he went to SA, which is Sexaholics Anonymous. My therapist was like, I think you do good in a 12-step program. I'm like, nope, not for me right now. Like, I'm so mad. I was really mad for a while. So when I talk about this and I'm like, oh, I had a forgiving heart. Like, I was really angry and PO'd for a long time.
Yeah.
And really bitter. And I felt alone at church. I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. And that's just the adversary, you know, just that isolation. He wants us to stay in isolation and feel empty and alone. But my husband did 12-step and then his group, and I did my group therapy. And then in 2011, we were asked to be facilitators in the LDS 12-step program. Mm-hmm. And I said, I've never been to a 12-step meeting in my life, to the missionary that was interviewing us. And she said, well, I think you should go to one. And so I did. And it was a general addiction meeting. My dad was a recovering alcoholic. And so I thought, I'll go to a general meeting first. And it changed my life. Just the spirit that I felt in that meeting was amazing. And I knew I was in the right place. And so we became facilitators in the LDS 12-step program. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And my husband did it for 9.
Wow.
And he helped the youth with the youth pilot program. And I did general meetings and sex addict, spouse, family, and friends support meetings as well. But it just that interesting, like intertwining thing. And while we were doing that, we were asked to film a special that was in between conference. And that's kind of when our story went public. We had been told before by our stake president to kind of not talk about our story, that we just needed to select a few people to share, like our family and very close friends. And at that time, when we were asked to do that, I was really torn because our daughter was turning 11. And so we needed to disclose to our kids a little bit, just enough to our older two, just general information that things had happened. And our kids weren't dumb. They, like, my daughter got baptized by my grandpa, and then my son one time said, why can't dad take the sacrament? Like, really loud in church. And so we just explained to them, dad's made some mistakes. And then when we got to that special in between conference, we did talk to our daughter in the general terms because she was old enough. And then that kind of started us with speaking, and we got a new stake president. And he's like, I actually want you to speak to every ward in our stake. And then that kind of spread by word of mouth. And we just started sharing our story. And our therapist people coming into new phase 1 groups, they ask us sometimes to come speak to them. So we've been able to do that. And we've just done some youth firesides, and it's interesting. We'll kind of have a lull, and then we'll get asked to do like 3 or 4 in a row. And I just told the Lord, I'll share my story until it's not needed anymore. And I don't know when that will be. But trying to think, do you have any? I know you're going to ask me questions, and if I think of things as we go along, then I'll.
That sounds good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to share your story. I have a question for you. So while you were in the rubble, right, and dealing with the difficult emotions that, of course, come with the grieving process of after discovery and the betrayal that's associated with that, what are some things that helped you with connecting inward towards yourself and doing your own work? Because it can be so difficult when you feel so betrayed to not be texting, looking at text messages, and just really involved in the hypervigilant mode of wanting to figure out what's happening. Yeah. So
I had my group of women, we would reach out, like there was anything that we were having a hard time with, our therapist would be like, during the week, reach out to each other. If I was triggered, I knew I have a few really like my 2 best friends knew our situation. So I knew I could reach out to them without a non-judgmental situation happening. Like I knew I couldn't talk to my mom because my mom would just take my side and be like, I hate him. You need to get divorced, And so I could reach out to a certain amount of women. That was really important to me. I had what's called a toolbox, and it was a book that I put together that had a letter to myself. I actually asked my parents to write me letters, and my grandparents had pictures of family members and my kids. It had $20 in it in case I needed to go somewhere. It had chocolate. It had some validating statements, positive affirmations. So I knew that if I was triggered or upset, that I could pull this book out. And I did mine in a book. Some people will call it a toolbox and just have a box, or mine was in a book, and I would go to that often. I checked in with myself. So me and my husband have also done this for many years, but I checked in physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, and then self-care every day. So I would, if I was off in one of those areas, I would go, okay, well, why am I off today? I also talked to my husband. I'd be like, I'm very triggered today. Like I heard a song. I know that music and pictures and smells and like certain times of year are very triggering for people. So I would talk to my husband. Hey, this triggered me today. I'm pretty upset. This is why. And we learned pretty early on in marriage counseling process. It's called parroting or validation, where I would say, hey, I'm really upset today. This was triggering to me. And instead of him getting defensive or angry or like trying to fix it for me, he'd say, so today this triggered you. And I would tell him because, and I would say why. And then he'd say, so this triggered you because, and I would say yes. And in the beginning, it was very unnatural. And then as we practiced it more, it turned into a very healing process because I felt like I was being heard and seen. Other ways that I reached out or found healing was through walking in nature, a lot of self-care. And self-care is really important. And I know people have now changed self-care. Well, self-care isn't a bubble bath because everybody deserves that or whatever. But for me specifically, like I need to take time for myself to do certain things every day. And when I don't do that, I know I'm going to be out of alignment. So I made sure in the beginning that I have certain processes in order so that, okay, I'm feeling off today. This is why I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go take a bath. I'm going to make a phone call to a friend. I'm going to journal. I'm going to read an affirmation, and I'm going to walk. Have I drank enough? Have I gotten enough sleep? Just asking myself those questions so that I feel safe with myself, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question or?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that does make sense. Yeah, we really talk a lot at Heart and Soul Wellness about your physical, emotional, spiritual, and sexual needs, because that's what makes a whole person.
Yep.
And so we really do talk a lot about that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because it is so important that we are aware of our whole self and not shut down any part of ourselves.
Nope.
So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So one question I have is, as you know, the grief cycle can be so heavy when you're healing from betrayal. And so I appreciate the positive coping skills that you use that sounds like were very helpful and helped to give you the strength that you needed. Some of our listeners are on a faith journey, and some of our listeners are either in or out of the LDS church, and some of our listeners have their own spiritual practice.
Yep.
So what kind of support would you recommend for someone who's going through this, but right now isn't quite sure where they're at in terms of their faith? I've gone through the peaks and the valleys with my faith journey. I definitely would say I believe that everybody has a higher power. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not sure what that looks like right now, maybe be trying to figure out what that is. And that's a whole nother box. Yes.
In and of itself. And what that looks like for everybody is totally different. And I have grieved, in my own personal experience, I can remember sitting at church just grieving, like nobody knows what I'm doing here. Nobody knows how I'm feeling. And people do know. And wherever we're at, whether it's work, home, our groups of friends, there is somebody experiencing what we are. But in our faith journeys, like it's our own journey. So my journey can look totally different than what your journey is, Sarah. And so just giving yourself the grace to sit in what that looks like. I think a lot of the times we, as humans, just want that quick fix, and we just want to make it feel all better. And we don't want to sit with our feelings, and we don't want to sit with where we're really at along our journey in life. And so I always say, sit in it, like sit in that process. So if you're really mad at God, I'm really mad at you right now. And I'm going to sit with this for a little while until I figure it out. And it might take a week. It might take a year. It might take 10 years to figure out your journey. What my journey looks like now is way different than it was 15 years ago when I started my recovery. And I do a lot of different practices now that, I wouldn't have even thought of 15 years ago. For example, just like chakra healing or somatic experiencing. Like my therapist has always been on the forefront of like learning new techniques. He's like, hey, I'm going through this 2-year training and I think I want to try it on you. Will you be willing? I'm like, absolutely. But I think that's also part of my faith journey with my God. Mm-hmm. And he's brought things and practices into my life that have helped me. So if you're in that faith crisis, or you're not sure, or you believe in a different power, like what does that look like for you? Are you moving away from it because of the trauma that's happened to you? Are you sitting in it? Are you moving more towards it? And why? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of the other modalities you practice. We do foot zoning here. We also do EMDR. And then I really like to be in the know with other modalities. So I try to learn as much as I possibly can. But I think it's really important because what we know is that we store trauma in our bodies.
Yep.
And when we store trauma in our bodies, that trauma needs to be released.
Yep.
And so it's really important to look for things. I appreciated you shared that because we will find what it is that we need in order to find the healing that we're looking for. I think, especially if we're engaged in that process.
I totally agree. Like I have a friend who loves tapping. Tapping has worked for her healing process. Meditation, yoga, just like EMDR. Music therapy. I know you interviewed somebody with music therapy. I have a really dear friend who's a music therapist.
Yeah.
And she's like, it is healing. And I totally agree with it. So being open to a lot of things has really blessed my life. Like my kids kind of call me the woo-woo lady because I'll try.
Right.
And I'm doing woo-woo in quotes because my kids will be like, you're going to try that? You bet I am. Like breathing, breath work. It's all, it's a good mode. They're all good modalities and you'll find what works for you. And that connects you to spirit. And what that looks like for you can look totally different for me.
Yep. Yeah. And I appreciate that you brought up spirit because mind, body, and spirit are really important to be integrated. And so reconnecting to who we really are at our core, our authentic self.
Yeah.
Was that helpful for you as you were healing and moving forward, getting connected with who you really are?
Yes. And I will say it is a constant work in progress. Like I have really struggled with that. I won't lie. Like that has been a struggle for me the last 15 years. There's been other traumas in my life from childhood, and there's things that happen in families after. I want people to know that you can't just have one trial or trauma in your life. Like you're going to have life experiences. You're going to have hardships and trials. And so just because I've healed from one thing doesn't mean I'm not working on another. And so for me, that self, I was just talking to my husband about this. I said, do you love you? The other day, I sent him a text and I said, do you love you? And he said, yeah, I'm mad at me sometimes. And I said, I'm really working on that. That's a really hard thing for me. And so me healing one thing doesn't mean something else isn't healed, but that doesn't mean that I'm not working on it and that I'm not trying to learn how to love me and how to heal me. And it's a constant practice, like finding the things that bring out who I truly am and connect me to me and who God sees me as, and remembering that I'm loved where I'm at, who I'm at, if that makes sense, who I am, no matter where I'm at, God will love me 100%. It's me that has the problem with loving me. And I need to remember that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I appreciated that you shared, like, for your higher power, really connecting in with how does God see me? So for whatever definition people use as like their higher power, I think it's important to look for what we can see more than just what we feel in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Something, grabbing onto something bigger than ourselves that can really help us with moving through this, because we're not meant to do this alone. And there's so much power in connection and in healing together as women. It's just powerful work.
It is. It's powerful work. And I also want to say, it's really important to get your validation from your higher power and not other sources. So I'm not getting my validation from my husband anymore. I'm not getting my validation from being a hardworking mom. I'm not getting my validation because I got this achievement at work. I'm getting my validation from the God that I believe in and my higher power. And that's first. And then those other things are like that little added bonus of who I am. And like women, I don't get my validation from other women. I get it from God first, but that group of women that I have is that little bonus, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as we're kind of closing things up, one thing that I love to remind women is that we all have this inner light, and it's strong and it's beautiful. And this allows us to become who we are meant to be. And so I like to remind the women that I work with that we can embrace this inner light and use it to move forward. And I just wonder what message you would like to leave our listeners with today.
Just know that wherever you're at in your journey, that you can get through it. Mm-hmm. My story is different than a lot of other people's. I have been blessed to stay married. I know that I have many friends that aren't married. I have friends that stayed married for a while and are divorced. I just want you to know that you're seen, heard, and loved. No matter where you're at and no matter what you're doing, there's always, always, always a way to reach out. And I think the adversary wants us to not reach out. He wants us to become reclusive. He doesn't want us to have a purpose. And I think reaching out and letting that light in and being vulnerable is so powerful. It's so powerful to share your story. Now, not everybody's going to share their story on a podcast or
right
with a big group of people or whatever. But even if you find, and you will, in your journeys, you will find those people who are safe for you, and reaching out to them is so important. And knowing that you are loved by your higher power, no matter what that looks like, that you can always reach out. And it's so important to do that. I have found myself turning inwards often, and I'm like, no, that's exactly the opposite of what you have been taught. Reach out, reach out, reach out. And so that is what I would say, is just reach out and let someone see your light. And if you need help, it's okay. If we're struggling, it's okay. We're human, and we're all going to have human foibles, and we all have problems and issues. And especially in betrayal, just thinking about my own mom, being a single mom, my mom worked really, really hard, and she was tired, and I never didn't see her light though. She always did things that would better for her betterment. Like I always saw her exercising. She took us out and like to the park, and we ran through the sprinklers in the middle of the day, and just the things that her light shined for us. And so that was a strong indication to me that you can get through hard times and still be happy. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking a lot.
I love that. I love that you shared that, because the difficult experiences we have really cultivate this inner strength within us. And I can hear that and sense that with you, that it's cultivated this richer experiences in your life. And, I am grateful to know so many women that are listening and also part of Heart and Soul Wellness that are warriors, survivors of very difficult, painful experiences, but yet find a way to thrive. And that's really what makes this world a better place, is when we can share our stories and really cultivate this rich meaning in our lives that we can all be connected with.
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Autumn, for sharing your journey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been an honor.
I'm really glad you're doing the work you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Heart and Soul Wellness podcast with your host, Sarah Carter. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today, leave a comment. Also, you can find us at heartandsoulwellness.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Join us again as we continue to help women heal, connect, and aspire to their true and authentic selves.